What if I told you that the greatest prison is not made of walls but of thoughts and perceptions? This provocative idea was expressed by none other than Charles Manson, a figure whose name is synonymous with chaos and destruction. Yet, his observations about the nature of prison and freedom offer a unique perspective on the human condition. Manson proposed that the mind can become a prison, a place where we confine ourselves with boundaries of our own making. These boundaries are not physical but mental constructs that limit our thoughts, our actions, and ultimately, our lives. We create these prisons out of fear, insecurity, and the confines of societal norms and expectations. And just like a prison warden, we enforce these limitations on ourselves, ensuring we stay within the boundaries we've set. But what are these boundaries, these mental prisons? They could be a belief that we're not good enough, or a fear of stepping out of our comfort zone. They could be the prejudices we hold, or the judgments we make about ourselves and others. These prisons are not visible, yet they dictate our lives, shaping our decisions and actions. Manson believed that we are our own wardens, enforcing our self-imposed limitations, but he also believed that we do our own time. In other words, we are the ones who decide how long we stay in these mental prisons. Some of us serve a life sentence, trapped in our habits, fears, and insecurities. Others manage to break free, to challenge their beliefs, face their fears, and step beyond their comfort zones. Manson's view of prison and freedom was, of course, influenced by his own experiences and circumstances. But his words offer a startling reflection on our own lives. How many of us are imprisoned by our own minds? How many of us are doing time in a cell of our own making? So, in Manson's view, freedom is a state of mind. But how did he arrive at this belief? Let's delve deeper into his unconventional childhood in the next scene, to better understand the origins of his philosophy. To understand Manson's perspective, we must journey back to his childhood, where he was an orphan deemed too ugly to be adopted. A harsh beginning, wouldn't you agree? It was a world where love was a foreign language and acceptance, an alien concept. Charles Manson, an orphan rejected by society, was introduced to a world where his worth was measured by his outward appearance, a world that deemed him too hideous for adoption. But what is beauty, really? Is it not subjective, a construct of the mind? Yet, in his tender years, Manson was taught otherwise. This early rejection was the first brick in the wall of his mental prison. He was shackled by the idea that his worth was determined by external validation, a validation he was denied due to his perceived ugliness. As a child, Manson was not only an orphan but also a prisoner of prejudice, of societal norms and superficial judgments. But he was also a warden of his own mind, his own beliefs. And thus, he served his time, not behind iron bars, but within the confines of his own thoughts. These formative years played a crucial role in shaping his view of freedom and imprisonment. To him, freedom was not merely the absence of physical constraints, it was the liberation from societal judgments, the freedom to be, unapologetically, oneself. In contrast, imprisonment was not solely about being confined behind bars. It was about being trapped within the walls of societal expectations and norms. It was about the inability to express oneself freely, the inability to be accepted for who one truly is. These experiences, these lessons from his childhood, they were the foundation of his unconventional beliefs. They were the threads that wove the tapestry of his philosophy, a philosophy that questioned societal norms, that challenged the traditional understanding of freedom and imprisonment. And so, Manson's early experiences laid the foundation for his unconventional beliefs. A foundation built not with bricks and mortar but with rejection, isolation, and an unyielding desire to be free. Manson's views were further shaped by his experiences in the courtroom. For him, the courtroom was not merely a place where legal disputes were resolved. It was a symbol of the power of the individual, a place where every person could voice their concerns and assert their rights. He often said, "That courtroom belongs to every human being in the United States." The courtroom, in his view, was a symbol of democracy. It represented a place where every individual had the right to be heard, the right to justice, and the right to freedom. Manson viewed the courtroom as a place where the individual could invoke their power, their rights, and their freedoms. He believed the courtroom was a manifestation of the power that each person holds within themselves. He also saw the courtroom as a safeguard against tyranny. He warned that if you take the courtroom away from one person, you're taking it away from all. He cautioned that without the power of the courtroom, we risk falling under the rule of kings and queens of yesteryears, who, in his words, are gonna come and play croquet with your heads. Manson's words highlight his belief in the importance of individual rights and freedoms. The courtroom, to him, was a symbol of these rights and freedoms. It was a symbol of the power that each individual holds, and the power that we collectively hold as a society. He believed that the courtroom is a battleground where these rights and freedoms are fought for and defended. He saw it as a place where the individual could stand up to the powers that be and assert their rights and their freedoms. Manson's views on the courtroom were shaped by his experiences, his beliefs, and his understanding of the world. He saw it as a symbol of power, a symbol of freedom, and a symbol of the individual's right to justice. Manson thus saw the courtroom as a battleground for individual freedom. For Manson, freedom was not just about physical confinement, it was about spiritual freedom as well. Manson's spiritual beliefs were eclectic and deeply personal. He saw the divine, or what he referred to as the will of God, in all aspects of life. He saw God in the mountains, in the wind, and even in the fiery fury of the sun. To him, the essence of God, or the will of life as he called it, was present in every atom, every particle, and every vibration of the universe. Manson's spirituality had a profound influence on his understanding of freedom. For him, freedom was not an external state to be achieved, but an internal realization to be experienced. He believed that the divine was not something to be sought outside, but something to be discovered within. This spiritual freedom, he argued, was the ultimate form of liberation. Music held a special place in Manson's spiritual understanding. He saw music as a manifestation of the divine, a medium through which the will of life expressed itself. He saw music as a cosmic dance, a divine symphony that echoed the rhythms and melodies of the universe. Manson saw himself as a conduit, a vessel through which this divine music flowed. In this sense, his music was not just an artistic expression, but a spiritual communion. Manson's spiritual beliefs also influenced his views on morality and ethics. He saw morality not as a set of external rules imposed by society, but as an internal compass guided by the will of life. He argued that true morality was about being in harmony with the rhythms of the universe, about dancing to the cosmic tune of the will of life. Manson's spiritual beliefs thus added another layer to his unique understanding of freedom. For him, freedom was not just about breaking physical chains, but about transcending mental boundaries. It was about dancing to the cosmic tune, about being in harmony with the will of life. It was about experiencing the divine within and realizing the spiritual freedom that comes with it. Another key concept for Manson was the value of pain. This might seem counterintuitive or even perverse to many of us, yet for Charles Manson, pain held a distinct and crucial role in the tapestry of human experience. He believed that pain was not an adversary to be avoided, but a teacher to be listened to. Let's delve into this a bit more. Manson is quoted as saying, "Pain's not bad, it's good, it teaches you things. Like when you put your hand in fire, ow! You know not to do that again." This simple yet profound statement reveals a lot about Manson's worldview. He saw pain as a signal, a guide, and a mechanism for learning. Pain, to Manson, was akin to a compass, pointing out the direction not to tread again. This mindset, this willingness to embrace discomfort and hardship, might have significantly influenced Manson's views on freedom and imprisonment. If one can learn from pain, can one not also learn from the pain of confinement? This perspective suggests that Manson may have seen his time in prison not merely as punishment, but as an opportunity for learning and growth. It's also worth noting that Manson's perspective on pain reflects a certain stoicism, a philosophical tradition that champions resilience and acceptance in the face of suffering. Stoics, much like Manson, see value in adversity, viewing it as a crucible that shapes and strengthens character. However, it's critical to remember that this perspective is not an endorsement of Manson's actions or beliefs. It's a look into his mindset, a window into how he navigated the world. It's an exploration of the complexities and contradictions that made him one of the most infamous figures of the 20th century. For Manson, pain wasn't merely a negative sensation to be avoided, but a signal to be heeded, a lesson to be learned. He saw it as a tool for self-guidance and self-improvement, a harsh but effective teacher. So for Manson, even pain had its purpose. Manson also had a unique perspective on money. He saw it not as a tangible asset or a measure of wealth, but as a game, a societal construct designed to keep the wheels of the world turning. Much like the pieces of a Monopoly set, he saw money as mere paper, its value derived not from its inherent worth, but from the value we, as a society, assign to it. He famously said, "Money is a game. It's only real to the people who work for it." And in a way, he wasn't wrong. Money is an agreed-upon illusion, a shared belief in its value that makes it real. It's the people who toil day in and day out, trading their time, energy, and skills for this paper, who give it its power. They are the players in this game, bound by the rules set by society. Manson's views on money, like many of his beliefs, were unconventional and thought-provoking. He challenged the widely accepted norms of society, pushing us to question the systems we are part of. His perspective on money was no different. To him, those who didn't work for money, those who rejected the game, were the ones who truly understood its illusory nature. This belief fits into his larger worldview, a perspective shaped by a life spent on the fringes of society. For Manson, life was a game, a series of illusions and constructs designed to control and manipulate. Money was just another cog in this machine, another tool used by the powerful to maintain control. In the grand scheme of things, Manson saw money as a means to an end, nothing more. Its value was transient, its power overrated. He saw beyond the facade, recognizing the game for what it was. Money, then, was just another aspect of the game of life for Manson. Like the prison walls that confined him, like the societal norms he rejected, money was just another construct, another illusion to be questioned and defied. In his later years, Manson made some bold claims about his spiritual status. Here we delve into one such claim where Manson declared himself as the Pope in the hills and in the mountains. Now, this wasn't a claim to religious authority but rather a declaration of his spiritual freedom. In the grand scheme of things, Manson's statement was a metaphorical representation of his belief system. He saw himself not as a prisoner, but as a spiritual leader, free from the confines of societal norms and expectations. The Pope in the hills and in the mountains signifies his detachment from the worldly affairs and his communion with nature. Manson's self-proclaimed title of Pope is interesting. The Pope in traditional context is the spiritual leader of the Catholic Church, guiding millions in their faith. Manson's use of this title suggests his belief in his own ability to guide and influence. But unlike the Pope who resides in the Vatican, Manson's spiritual domain was the hills and mountains, symbolizing his freedom and his estrangement from the mainstream. You see, Manson's philosophy was deeply rooted in the idea of personal freedom. He saw himself as a free spirit, unbound by the chains of societal conventions. His popehood in the hills and mountains was a manifestation of this freedom. It was his sanctuary, his spiritual realm, where he was the ultimate authority. His ideas may have been unconventional, even disturbing, but they offer a unique insight into his perception of freedom and authority. He saw himself not as a prisoner of his circumstances, but as a leader in his own spiritual journey. He was the Pope of his beliefs, his thoughts, his freedom. So, in the end, what does it all mean? Well, it's a testament to Manson's belief in his own spiritual autonomy. He saw himself as a free man, not confined by physical walls or societal norms. His popehood in the hills and mountains was his way of asserting this freedom, his spiritual emancipation. In Manson's mind, he was not just free, but a spiritual leader. Manson's views on power and control were also quite unique. He saw fear, not as an emotion to be avoided but as a tool to be harnessed. Fear, to Manson, was a way to exert control, a way to dominate and rule. Manson believed that fear was a powerful motivator, a force that could be used to manipulate and coerce. He saw himself as the master of this fear, the king who could wield it to his advantage. This was not a belief born out of an abstract philosophical thought, but rather a conviction forged in the fires of his own experiences. In Manson's worldview, fear was a response to the unknown, the unfamiliar. By positioning himself as a figure of fear, he believed he could control the narrative, control how others perceived and interacted with him. He saw himself as the orchestrator of this fear, the puppeteer pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Manson's belief in the power of fear was not limited to his personal interactions. He saw it as a universal principle, a law that governed the world at large. If he could tap into this fear, he believed he could control not just individuals but societies, even the entire world. His words, laced with the imagery of fear, were a testament to this belief. For him, wielding fear was not just about instilling terror, but about claiming power. He saw himself as the king of this fear, the one who could control it, manipulate it, and use it as a tool for his own ends. But even as Manson saw himself as the king of fear, he also recognized its limitations. He understood that fear was a prison of its own, a cage that could trap not just its victims, but also its master. And yet, he embraced this prison, reveled in it, for he believed that even within its confines, he was free. Fear then was another form of prison that Manson believed he could control. Manson's perception of time was, like many things, unique. This wasn't a man who saw time as a linear, constant progression. No, for him time was malleable, something to be bent and shaped. He claimed to live 100 years a day, a statement that on the surface seems absurd, even impossible. But let's delve deeper into this concept. Living 100 years a day is not about longevity, nor about cramming a century's worth of activities into 24 hours. It's about depth, intensity, the richness of experience. It's about squeezing every drop of life from each moment, immersing oneself so deeply into the present that even seconds become lifetimes. In the blink of an eye, a world of thoughts, emotions, and perceptions unfolds. In that sense, time is no longer a prison for Manson but a playground. Here, he is not confined by the ticking of a clock or the turning of a calendar page. He is free to explore, to experiment, to experience. He is free to live, and live fully, in every moment. For him, a single day is not a mere 24 hours, but 100 years worth of life, of learning, of growth. But what does this mean? Is this just the ramblings of a man disconnected from reality, or does it hold a deeper truth about our own perception of time? Perhaps it's a challenge to us all, a challenge to stop counting the minutes and start making the minutes count. To not just survive each day but to live it so fully, so intensely, that we too can claim to live 100 years a day. This is not about disregarding time, but about redefining it. It's about breaking free from the constraints of a clock and experiencing time in a more profound, personal way. It's about recognizing that time, like life itself, is what we make of it. In Manson's world, even time was subject to his control. So, what does all of this tell us about Manson's understanding of freedom? Circling back to our initial question, we can see how Manson's experiences and beliefs crafted a unique perspective on freedom. In his world, freedom wasn't a straightforward concept, but rather a labyrinth of thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Manson's freedom was embedded in his mind, a psychological prison he deemed more potent than any physical confinement. He was his own jailer, imposing on himself the most severe sentence, a life trapped within the walls of his own thoughts and beliefs. His unconventional childhood, marked by neglect and abandonment, further shaped his understanding. He believed that he was too beautiful to be set free, suggesting an internalization of his perceived unworthiness of freedom. This underlines the subjective nature of freedom, how it is often a reflection of our self-perception. Manson also associated freedom with power, particularly the power wielded in a courtroom. He saw the courtroom as a battleground where one's freedom could be won or lost. This notion reflects his life, which was punctuated by numerous courtroom battles. His belief in the will of life and the value of pain further complicated his view of freedom. He saw life as a series of lessons, where pain served as a teacher, guiding us towards enlightenment, and ultimately, freedom. This perspective suggests that freedom isn't merely a state of being, but a journey of self-discovery and growth. Manson's view of freedom was also influenced by his perception of money as a game, and his self-proclaimed role as the Pope in the Hills. He dismissed the societal constructs that often dictate our understanding of freedom, instead choosing to define it on his own terms. Finally, Manson's dance with fear reveals a paradoxical relationship with freedom. He believed that by embracing our fears we can harness their power and achieve true freedom. In Manson's world, freedom was a state of mind, a spiritual journey, a battle in the courtroom, and a dance with fear. It was a complex, multifaceted concept that defied traditional understanding.